Hi everybody, we're here today with Graham and Steve from Daktela. Just going to have a bit of a chat around customer experience and AI, I believe.
Morning, Andy.
Yeah, how you doing?
Good, you?
Long time since we've seen you.
Indeed. Yesterday, I think.
24 hours, I believe. So obviously we were at the Cavell Summit up in London yesterday, so great chance to do a bit of meeting up with some old faces, some very old faces actually in certain cases, who I haven't seen for years. But I think, sort of takeaways really for me from the day was like everybody's talking about AI, like literally everybody's talking about AI. And also kind of like the opportunity for what I think historically people will refer to as contact centre, but customer experience was a bit of a buzz phrase yesterday. So, yeah, I thought we would kick off the conversation there. So, what did you think about yesterday? What little nuggets did you take away, Graham?
So I guess AI is one of those most widely spoken about technologies, but probably the least understood.
Yeah.
But it's really pervasive, so it plays everywhere. And I think to your comments about, the specifics around customer experience, I think, this disaggregating that technology from contact center is really important because it has so many applications. I think what's really going to drive it is really clearly understood use cases where people can see how the technology is playing. And I think one of the more recent examples is probably using artificial intelligence to power voice bots, so people can use what's most natural to them, their voice, conversationally, and have a human style conversation and get the outcomes they're looking for. But the statistics are all there. I think Cavell have done a great job of surveying the market European wide as well. It's definitely the technology that's going to play a significant role in customer and agent / employee experience. I think we can't disaggregate those two things. I think if you've got good, well-informed, productive agents, you're probably working towards a pretty good customer experience.
And I think for me, obviously we're talking about yesterday, but the three of us have had a number of conversations over recent weeks. But I think for me, one of the things I sort of took away, touching on your point about Cavell's sort of analysis of the market, is if you look back at our collective histories, contact centre was always this sort of mythical beast almost, that you had to be, super knowledgeable at contact centre, and it was really complicated and it took months and months and months to sell. But I think for us yesterday, it underlined the fact that, contact centre, contact, customer experience, however you want to term it, it's pervasive across all types of customer now. And I know a lot of people will point to COVID and everything as kind of almost unlocking that. But I think it was really clear with some of the stats yesterday that there is a marketplace out there. It doesn't really matter what size of business you are. It's all about how are you communicating with your customers and trying to almost get away from siloing of technologies and talking technology. And it's like, I think one of the guys maybe from, was it Zoom, talking about selling to profiles of people rather than, actually sort of going and selling technology and sort of selling contact centre per se.
I think it's this, and we speak about it a lot. We try not to get too bogged down with the notion of contact centre because there are so many customers that do not associate themselves with contact centre. But they all have customers, they all communicate with their customers, and increasingly through different age groups and different technology stacks, they'll choose to, and often it's about choice, they'll choose to engage with you in a very different way. So if, for example, I'm on a train journey and I want to have a conversation to book something, I can't do it on a real live phone call, but I can do it asynchronously via, say, WhatsApp.
And there's also, jumping in on that, I think there's also, to your point about age groups, there's a large number of people that won't even want to jump on a phone call.
Absolutely.
I think we've also got to be very careful. I mean, I remember doing a presentation at a Customer Experience Summit in September last year, and it was fascinating to me that as delegates coming to that conference, they had to identify what they were there for. And 65% of the people who were coming to that Customer Experience Summit were there to look about how AI can help them deliver a better customer experience. And it's fascinating because we in the presentation we looked at two examples of using it right and using it wrong. And you've got to be very careful, because one of them is a very practical example for me. I used to use a utility company, and one day they suddenly decided to remove all their telephone numbers off there, and they put an AI tool on there. Fantastic, looked really, really good, and it worked well. But when it didn't work, the problem was I was getting frustrated then. There was no way of dealing with that. I couldn't speak to somebody, and I was locked in this AI prison, if you like, in some respects. And what I did is I ended up moving utility companies and went to another utility company. So I became a part of Churn. So that company deployed AI without really thinking through the impact on the customer experience. And as a result, I'm sure they didn't worry about Steve McSherry, moving away as a customer. But if Steve McSherry was one of 10,000 customers who had the same experience, all of a sudden the savings they've made by putting in an AI tool have been completely demolished by the fact they've had a customer churn of 10,000 users.
I often think it's this whole thing about walk a mile in your customer's shoes, and I think frequently perhaps people who are driving these kind of projects are not spending time seeing what it looks like through the eyes of their customer. Because if they'd done or experienced what you'd experienced, they probably would have spent some time and some money ensuring that you weren't in jail and that there was an escape route. Because ultimately that's what you need. If things aren't working, you need an option that gets you out. And again, that will tell you about your customers' preferences, unless you're not interested in your customers' preferences. It's possible.
So you said you had a couple of examples, I think.
I was saying that was an example of things done badly. But then we have another example of, in fact, one of our customers who is using AI in conjunction with the customer experience. So they had an issue. It was a retail company, and they had issues where people were logging in and booking slots where they'd go to the store and they'd try on a dress or shoes or something like that. And they would get a lot of people who are booking them online, but then not turning up to do the actual trial or the test. So they thought, okay, we can use AI to manage this. So they now implemented an AI tool that said, okay, when somebody's booked this slot, they would then have the AI tool communicate consistently with that person to make sure they turned up. AI would know the best time to contact them, the best method of contacting them, and that way they saw a massive improvement in the number of people who actually turned up to attend the store, and therefore as a result they sold more. And it is a consequence of therefore thinking, right, okay, we've got a problem. How does AI solve the problem? But now let's implement it in a way that it works for the customer, and therefore we solve our problem but actually deliver a better service to the customer.
So it's almost like the sort of guiding principles here is sort of putting some thought into, if you're a business and you're thinking about AI, it's just put a bit of thought into how do I actually need AI to work for me as a business, from my, I think you touched on this earlier on when we were talking off camera, as they say, but almost that when we looked at the webinar that we did the first part last week, when you're talking about how does it impact my customers, how does it impact my staff, and how does it impact my business? And I think unless you can align AI and its benefits to each of those areas, just aligning it to one is possibly going to end up with the first scenario. If you've made sure you've aligned it to all three of the areas that we talked about, then it's going to be more of a successful deployment.
And I think the consultants Deloitte did a fantastic report on specifically the contact centre of 2030, and it was about how you combine AI with the human touch. And it's all about, don't lose sight of the fact that your customers still do like to talk to people, but there are some benefits of AI that actually mean you can become far more effective at your customer communication. So it's just making sure that you think it through as part of your overall strategy, and that's the key thing.
So I think, for me, when it sort of comes to those three pillars, almost one of the areas that businesses shouldn't ignore is this kind of thought process, which I think came up a couple of times at the Cavell thing yesterday, was, what about my job? It's almost like people worrying about, we've all seen the sci-fi movies where AI takes over the world and destroys humanity. I'm quite sure, hopefully that's not going to be the case, but I think to a much lesser degree, there will be people who do sort of agent type roles today who might be looking at this going, well, hang on a minute, right? What's my job going to be in the long term? And I think it's, understanding where AI can maybe fill some skills gaps.
I think
and improve that process as opposed to you're not just deploying it to kind of go, I'm going to save however many thousands of pounds a year on agent salaries, because that's not really where we want to be heading with this, right? So
sometimes it's an augmentation. So it's we have a robust customer engagement process and people and technology, but actually it's again understanding that customer expectation, customer experience, customer requirements. If your customers are requiring your services outside of what you're servicing today, this technology can have a great play, particularly if you want to rearrange an appointment, you want to book an appointment, you want to check stock, you want to see where your delivery is. And there are some really good retail businesses that do this quite well. I'm sure we all know who they are. But you can do it at a really small level. So if you're an SME, this technology plays really nicely, because you don't have to bring an employee in or employees. This can all be automated, which is often what the customer wants. Some degree of automation. It's not a panacea. Technology rarely is, but it has some fabulous places to play for sure.
And I think sort of looking at how we would potentially utilise AI. When we were just looking at some other AI stuff this morning together, but it's kind of that time saving element as well, because there's arguably a lot of tasks that you might get an agent to do. You think to yourself, actually, they could be freed up to having more serious conversations with my customers. You don't need them checking stock, and you don't need them answering questions about what does your company do. You have the bot there to kind of almost front end everything. Deals with the stuff that you don't necessarily want your guys and girls in your contact centre teams being bogged down with, and can sort of free up time and just make things a little bit more efficient, I guess.
I think there's two elements to that, because you can actually not only use AI technology, as you mentioned, like voice bots, to do some automation that releases your human staff to do more complex things, but actually AI also can be used as a tool to help the human agents do things better. So for example, a classic case is that is, if somebody's responding on an email and they want to put information into that email, you can use AI into a knowledge base to gather the information to populate that email to a certain extent, help the person who's sending the email be more effective at sending emails. You can even use AI tools to change the tone of it, make it more professional, make it shorter, make it quicker, make it more interactive. There's kind of things you can do that means that, yes, the human being still is in control, but they're actually all of a sudden having all these tools at their disposal to make them more effective as well.
And I think that's a really good point, because, we're not all wordsmiths. And if you've got people in your team who are responding to people on email, I mean, I, from personal experience, look at some of the customer service emails I get back, and you're just like, you've not even spell checked that. Your grammar is all over the place, and that might not bother a majority of people. But I think in terms of professional, outward sort of facing to your customers, you're taking the sort of peaks and troughs out of that as well by having an AI tool that could do that sort of first step. You might have one person who's really good at writing emails, one person who's really bad, but if you're using that AI tool to kind of go, well, here's the context, here's the main content, then you're sort of presenting them. I think you're using it in a good way to present a much more professional approach to your customers.
I agree, and another really good use case, again, we were talking about this a little earlier, weren't we, is this ability for AI to take massive amounts of information and summarise it, which is incredibly useful. I'm sure there's a whole load of use cases, but if you're running a support desk, for example, the ability to record those calls, have that transcript stored in your CRM system, but then summarised, is hugely beneficial. Like if you're in a supervisory role and you've got a customer engagement situation you're looking at, there's maybe swathes of information. AI can summarise that, and you can very quickly take in what's happened and have a really good view of what that engagement's been like. Great use case, in my opinion.
So here's another thing that I picked up on really for the first time yesterday, and I'm keen on your views on this. So security around AI, are these concerns well founded, or do you think the industry has got that part of it well locked down? So I think there were some concerns from a number of the panel guests yesterday around almost like we don't we don't want our people having access to AI because there's certain things, it pushes out. We don't want it in the public domain. But I kind of look at it and go, is that a well-founded concern, or do we have the security side of things pretty well sussed at the moment?
I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier about deploying AI in an effective manner. I think there is a danger that if you don't think it through and you don't plan it effectively as part of an overall strategy, there is a danger you could expose yourself to those kind of things. But equally, if you do it properly and you can control access and you make sure that the information that's being fed is correct, then I think that there's ways of ensuring that we don't have that problem. It's just, don't see AI as a panacea to solve all your problems. Oh, let's deploy an AI tool, job done. Actually, no, because in the case I talked about, it actually led to significant customer churn. Same with security. Let's make sure you do it properly and follow the right kind of planning.
I think it's okay to have those considerations. I think it's quite healthy.
Yeah.
I think
I guess it was more. I suppose more from the point of view of I look at it from our perspective of, do we feel we've got the answers at the moment if somebody does challenge us on the security side of things?
Yes, and I guess it's a similar type of conversation to another one we heard yesterday around data sovereignty. We're increasingly in a global space. It's important to understand where your data is. Where is your data? How's it being used? And it's healthy for a business to talk to their suppliers, their downstream, to say, well, how is my data being handled? Because I need to then tell my customers the same thing. So I think it probably falls into the same area. It's due diligence. If you're going to do it properly, plan it, and make sure that you're considering everything.
I think the other thing that's interesting is that AI in itself can be its own guardian to a certain extent, because we have the ability, after you've had an engagement with a customer, to then use AI tools to track how effective that communication was. We talk about things like sentiment analysis or emotion detection, which talks about you've had an engagement with an individual. Now let's use things like sentiment analysis tools using AI to say, how effective was that? Was the end customer happy on that based on the words they used or the tone they used? Various uses of AI to then say, actually no, the customer was really unhappy with that. Okay, why was the customer unhappy? Well, maybe because we didn't do it right. And was that the individual who didn't do it right, or was it the AI tool that didn't do it right? And all of a sudden you have the information to say, okay, let's make amendments to that to make sure we do get it right.
Which comes back to this kind of 3 pillars thing again. I guess it's, you're implementing it for one reason, but you're looking at how it impacts those other 2 areas. So, it could be about, making your agents more efficient, but what you was just saying, it's also helping to kind of benefit the business, because the output of it is also allowing you to go, oh, actually, we might never have thought about the sentiment of that conversation, because we've put the phone down, another call's come in, and we've gone straight on to the next customer. And I think, again, if you go back a few years in terms of sort of contact centre, those tools were horrendously expensive, and they were the purview of the really big organisations, whereas now we're talking about stuff that's completely within the grasp of your smallest customer.
Exactly.
And I don't mean smallest in a derogatory term, because we know we've got a number of customers on the cloud platform that might be small in terms of number of users, but actually really complex in terms of the requirements. And I highlight, probably one of the first deployments we did of the Contact product, where you've got a small number of users, but are actually making use of multiple different communication channels. So historically, you could have forgiven the salesperson for going, this customer's never going to be contact centre because it's only 4 or 5 users. Well, actually, you've just kind of proven the fact that it's really important to understand kind of what customers do.
I think in our experience, quite often, that the smaller customers with a relatively small number of people are probably the ones who are more adventurous. Thank you. Adventurous to actually go.
But it could end up being advantageous, right?
Well, exactly.
So
they were looking at different tools that they could use, which basically says, okay, well, we'll use these 3 or 4 different tools. Whereas I guess the more traditional established contact centres of a couple hundred people may actually be locked into certain communication tools, and that's all they use. And it's harder for them to develop these kind of things. But with AI, all of a sudden, it works on 6 people and 600 people. It doesn't make any difference.
And it feels like we're sort of on the cusp of segueing from sort of the AI kind of conversation into this sort of other areas that we saw highlighted yesterday, which was around sort of customer experience. But before we move on to that, sort of from each of you, pick on you first, Steve. If you had to summarise where we're at with AI today and where you see it in the next few years, what would your kind of thoughts be on that?
I think AI presents some fascinating opportunities for most businesses. I think I would caution, don't just deploy it for the sake of it. You really need to understand, what is it your customers want from you, and can AI help fulfill that requirement? And as long as you understand what your customers want and develop an AI tool that enables you to deliver against that, it will be successful, and it would be advantageous, lovely word, to use for your business.
Okay. What's your thoughts, Graham?
It's a really interesting one. I think where we are, we're very much, it's very, very early days on the journey. I think AI is probably quite confusing for most people, because I think sometimes people are talking about AI when it's not really AI, and I think that then creates a bit of fear, uncertainty and doubt for people. But I do think we're very much on the early part of the journey. I think it can play a really small role in an organisation, and it's interesting to see, I think businesses are starting to experiment with it, perhaps in small ways, even perhaps just making it useful as an internal system to help deal with internal things. And if you imagine you're a large enterprise, and maybe you've got an IT help desk, for example, that might be a really interesting play there. But yeah, I think we're on the cusp of something phenomenal here. I think, I can't specifically remember who has said it, but there's a lot of concern about people saying my job will be replaced by AI. And I think, there's a very powerful mind shift that says, actually, no, your job is going to be replaced by somebody who knows how to leverage AI. So I guess the message is, go find out what's it all about. Embrace how can you get involved? Exactly. I don't think it's going away anytime soon.
And I guess from a pure product play, from our point of view, and sort of from our customers and their customers' point of view, is that we are in a good place because we've got strategies there that are already delivering AI today, but with a long-term view to just maximise every element of AI and keep developing that as we see new technologies come through, right?
Yeah, a lot of leverage there, I think.
So the other sort of part of the conversation I wanted to touch on, which we've been talking about for a long time, and it's been in our webinar part 1 that we did last week, part 2 tomorrow, is kind of almost trying to detach the salespeople from this technology approach. And I think it applies to AI, because the last thing we want someone really at the moment to do is to go in to see a customer and go, right, Mr. Customer, I want to talk to you today about AI, because you might well just frighten them and they'll run for the hills. Whereas actually what we're trying to do around the contact centre, for want of a better phrase, which we're going to talk about, is kind of almost detach that sort of technology speak and try and get people to sort of understand that, we've just touched on, it's not just big customers these days, it's all sorts of customers who are all engaged. This is one thing they were again talking about yesterday. Any customer you go and see is engaged with customers of their own at some point. So ergo, they are doing some sort of customer service and customer contact. Just because they haven't got an office full of 100 people sat at desks in that traditional contact centre environment doesn't mean you're not managing a customer experience. And I think for me that's one of the things that came across. It was, again, I don't know who said it, but it was like removing the centre from contact centre, and sort of trying to de-silo everything and like get into your customer, talk to them, find out what they do, and then you've got your toolbox sitting behind you that this product is going to suit that requirement, that product there is going to fulfil that requirement. I mean, I know you guys are representing Daktela, and you're about contact centre, but what's your view on this kind of moving away from the technology sort of conversation and siloing things and pushing it more down this get to know your customer?
I think firstly, I think yes, although we're branded a contact centre company, we really prefer to be called a communications platform company, because what we do is we're an enabler to enable our customers to communicate with their customers. And contact centre is a misleading term because you've already identified. We have customers with 5 or 6 users who are using multiple strands of technology to communicate with their customers. They're in no way regarded as a traditional contact centre. Yes, equally we have the larger ones that are traditional contact centres, but we play in both spaces. I think what to me is important is when you're actually talking to a salesperson to go in to talk to somebody who's looking at technology, is first of all find out why. What's the catalyst? What's causing them to look at this technology? Is it because they've had a bad experience previously? Is it because there's some business change? Is it because there's some competitive measures? Is it because there are some regulatory changes? There's always a catalyst for what, most IT directors and CEOs don't wake up and over their cornflakes in the morning go, do you know what, today I'm going to change all my technology. Why? Well, because I need to.
And isn't also the reality behind that statement that you look at a huge number of the SMB market is massive, right? A huge number of those customers are not even going to have, quote unquote, a IT director or a CIO or whatever, because they're just not, it's not that structure, But what's your thoughts?
In many ways, the smaller businesses are almost easier to engage with because they're much more aware of the challenges. Whereas if you engage in an IT type conversation, you're having an IT conversation. To Steve's point here, it's what we need to be doing is understanding what's happening in their business. What even is their business? What do they do? Who do they do it for? What sorts of things do their customers experience engaging with them? What challenges do they see? And oftentimes it's just that very open question of tell me about your business that uncovers the things you need to know.
But I think you've got a personal example, haven't you, where
exactly
you was involved in that conversation.
And it was probably... It probably wasn't an ideal situation, but it ended up being an ideal situation. We had a partner who was relatively new in this space, had certainly done the job to identify that it was a potential opportunity, but wasn't sure why. And on the first meeting, because we didn't know what we were meant to present, the first question to the customer is, really good to meet you. Can you tell me a little bit about your business? And the next 2 or 3 minutes, we learned everything we needed to know about why we were there, which was, we can't do this is a problem, my staff can't, and it was probably the simplest, most harmless question that identified everything we needed to know. And as it goes, that opportunity is maturing quite nicely because we were able to show them how we could help them with some of the technology to fix the problems that they were experiencing.
For me, it's almost like, this whole concept of customer experience is sort of becoming a bit of a guiding principle in terms of, how to engage with the end user customer. But I think it also feels like we need to sort of explain to people, we're not saying that selling is easy. It's not, right? But in terms of being able to sell a really rounded solution, the sort of secrets here is about keeping it simple, asking your customer about their business. And it's not like everything will fall into place, but to your example, if you're taking that approach, potentially you're going in with one mindset, thinking, it's going to be 10 users, few handsets, a bit of this, but you're coming out of it going, wow, okay, this is way bigger than I thought it was going to be. But certainly using that customer experience piece as the guiding principle that then guides your conversation, your questions with the customer, that then allows you to come away and go, wow, okay, this is a lot bigger than we thought it was going to be, right?
If you think about it, if you're to be an effective salesperson in this environment, we've talked earlier on about how the business needs to understand what its customers want, so that the salesperson needs to understand equally what their business's customers wants, because that will dictate where there are gaps. And it's technology is great, but it's appropriate technology. You don't just go in and say, my system will do 56 things. Well, there's only 3 I want, so
Exactly.
That's not interests me. You find out what the pain points are within any business, and you address those. And that's very much what we tried to do on the first webinar we talked about. It's like find out what the customer's problems are, and then address those. And if there's 50 other things you can do, but the customer's not interested, don't talk about them.
No, exactly. And it's almost like that technology part of the conversation needs to be at the back end of that conversation. Let's go on the journey with the customer first. Who are you? What do you do? What industry are you in? What your problems you got? Then you're kind of in the back of your mind, you're building that picture of, okay, that sounds like it could be an AI thing, or and then you're going away building that solution, and then you're going back to the customer. You said, da 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 da. This is what we can do to help you, and you've kind of. I'm not saying you've done all the hard work, but at that point, you're matching to your exactly to what your customer said are their issues. You're saying this is what we can do to help you. And I guess the point here is about trying to help our customers maximise the value in the sale, right? Because we're all here to make money.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And why would you not want to take a £5,000 deal and turn it into a £7,500 or £10,000 deal, just based on asking the right questions and getting to know that customer in the right way? You know?
I guess one of the other challenges for, I guess I know we're not talking about technology, but we are talking about technology. Is it's not every single customer will want this technology, and therefore salespeople out there are probably not coming across it every day, and therefore they're not necessarily on their A game because they haven't had sufficient exposure. And I think one of the really key points here is that we are here as a group, as a team, doing it regularly to support them in those endeavours. So don't worry about not knowing. You will learn this, and it might take some time, but the key point is make sure you understand what the customer's going through and why they're considering.
I agree with that, and I think it's not about that salesperson being technically proficient in every aspect of the portfolio, because you could argue in many cases that's not their job anyway. Right. But the one thing we do want people to get right is that first step of customer engagement. Come back to us and tell us who your customer is, what do they do, where are the pain points. We can then help you collectively kind of go, right, the solution. And I think we've said this before. I remember working somewhere else a few years back. There was a director who came out with this thing about, a solution's only a solution if it's matching answering a problem for the customer, right? So, that's our job. They come and go say, I've been to see a customer, this is what I do, this is where the problems are, and then we can look at it and go, right, okay, well, this product, that product, this product, that's the solution.
Sometimes you become a catalyst for the customer as well, because as you go in asking questions and they start vocalising the things that they probably only had going around their head, and you suddenly start getting to a new place where you're starting to add real value, because the customer's saying, oh yeah, we have these issues and so on, and we need to be in touch with our customers more, and suddenly through maybe some automation, some clever, well implemented solutions, can then give them the answer they need. So you've actually now got time to ring your customers on a regular. Oh, fantastic! And so you're then into a different space where the customer hadn't necessarily thought about those things, but you've become the catalyst for thinking about. It's probably an overused term, but the art of the possible.
I think I think the role of the salesperson is to sit in the middle. The salesperson over here has to know their technology. And they need to know their technology well enough to be able to then say, right, okay, I know how this is going to benefit you. What they don't know is they don't necessarily know the customer's business. The customer will know their business, and the salesperson needs to be that bridge between the two. He has to, or she has to, understand exactly what's happening in the customer's business before they can then say, these bits of my technology solve that problem. And it was fascinating. I go back years.
We know.
I go back many years ago when we used to sell a lot of on-premise contact centres, and I remember one insurance company went out and acquired a contact centre, put it in the telecoms room over there and said, right, that's my problem solved now. And our argument was, no, that's not your problem solved. You've now got a tool that allows you to identify what your problem is, and now we need to use that tool to solve your problem. Just putting the technology in the corner over there and saying, switching it on, does not solve the problem.
But I think you just touched on a key point, which is your customer knows their business. They don't know your technology. You might be lucky enough to go and visit a customer that's really genned up on all the technology that's available. But I would argue more often than not, you're not going to find a customer that is going to go, I want this and I want that and I want that and I've done all my research and this is what I need. And that's where the sales process could fall down. Because if you're just going to go in and, like you say, if you know your product and you're just going to fall back on, I'm going to talk to you about everything I know about the product and try and see if something sticks, then that's where it's not going to work, right? But if you're holding back and keeping that in reserve, but you're doing the first bit, which is tell me about your business, then you can kind of go, right, okay,
It's the old thing about if you're not getting the answers you need, ask better questions.
Exactly.
I have a lot of sympathy for people buying this kind of technology or any technology, because I've seen people who are buyers going around shows and exhibitions, and they'll go at one stand, they'll look at one stand, they're trying to work out what that company does.
Yeah.
And they don't know.
Yeah.
And as vendors, you have to be very careful, because vendors more often than not use different terms for the same thing. So one vendor will call it X, somebody will call it Y, somebody will call it Z1, and it's the same thing basically, but different. And the person buying this technology is thinking, hang on a second, how can I compare that with that? Because they're different. Well, they're not. They just call it something different. So it's a very, very difficult one. And therefore, the way of dealing with that is park your technology, what's your problem?
And
here's my solution.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we all know that, don't we?
Yeah.
You know, our industry.
We all do it from time to time.
Again, we saw it yesterday, didn't we? We've got. It's too easy for us to fall back on our acronyms and our jargon sometimes, and you know that can be a comfort place for some of the people. But you've always got to be conscious of the person you're talking to. You know, they've probably got their own jargon in their own industry.
They have, yes.
You know, so. Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. So if we were to look at sort of drawing this particular sofa chat to a close, my sort of thoughts overall is that, you know, the whole contact opportunity is huge. I think that's been demonstrated by a number of stats we saw yesterday and in previous months. The market, in terms of the types and sizes of customer, is huge, you know, from 2 or 3 users through to thousands of users. We've certainly got the technology at our disposal from Pragma and our partnership, you know, with you guys. And my sort of sense I get from the conversations we've had is almost like to, if you was going to say to a salesperson, don't be afraid to have the conversations, you know, ask the right questions and you will uncover opportunities. But from your perspective, Graham, start with you. What do you sort of say your summary is of the contact arena, the opportunity at the moment?
I think you've said it really nicely there. I guess what I would probably say is...
Sorry, can you just repeat that?
What you said it nicely. We've got that on camera, right? Or as my wife keeps saying to me, yes, you're right. So what I would say is that there are people that are going to be watching this that are really comfortable with the conversation. Yeah. And they're perhaps going to go out independently and find some opportunity that we can work together on. But there's also going to be a lot of people that are still unsure, still slightly nervous. What I would say is, bring us in. We're here to support you. We're here to support you with the conversation. We will help you ask the right questions, uncover the right elements. And if it isn't a good fit, we'll tell you it's not a good fit. You know, we're not going to start wasting our time on opportunities that we don't need to when there's loads of opportunities out there. So I would say bags of opportunity, small, medium and large. It's all going to be about the use case. What are the business problems? What have you uncovered in the bits that you found that you kind of gone, well, that sounds like it could be a good fit. Bring us in, we're happy to help.
And I think, sorry, just before we jump on to your sort of feedback, Steve, I think to add to that, although it's not, you're one sort of part of the jigsaw puzzle,
absolutely,
right, for us. So I think it's probably also important to sort of add to that. You know, if you look at our portfolio today and you look at the sort of key subjects people are talking about out there, there's very little, if anything, we can't help with. And I know that sounds like we're bragging and, you know, oh yeah, we'll try and prove you wrong on that. But, you know, people yesterday were talking about mobility. You know, we've got a mobile solution. We've got PCI in the portfolio. Add to that the contact and the AI and the transcription and all that stuff. There's very few opportunities that our partners are going to come across where we shouldn't be able to help them.
And it's not by accident, right? It's by design.
You know, it helps. It's a good example of if you listen to what your customers are telling you, it helps guide your portfolio to in a direction.
Yes.
You know that it needs to go in.
Agreed.
Is that what you got to say?
No, I agree with everything. I'm just trying to work out how come your wife knows him, and he's always right. But that's a different story. No, I just
you only need to watch this back.
Where'd you find him?
Just picking up on that last point, I think I remember going to a Gamma presentation not that long ago for service providers because we have a relationship with Gamma obviously, and they came up with a term which I've never heard of before, which was fascinating, which was they looked at the market for product such as ours, which is both what they called not contact centre and contact centre. So it's this whole, and the not contact centre are those people who can benefit from the kind of things a contact centre can do and how you communicate with your customers without actually becoming a contact centre, if that makes sense.
Exactly.
So we've always promoted the idea that the kind of technology we have just doesn't have to sit in a contact centre. It can sit in any business who wants to communicate effectively with its customers. And I think that to me is the interesting thing, is all of a sudden we're now not looking at, we're looking right across there. We're in a great space where we're not a niche. We're in a place where everybody who communicates with customers needs technology like ours. So the market potential is massive.
And we're all looking for a new frame for it. So not contact centre. Somebody came up with MCAS yesterday. So it's customer engagement solutions, essentially.
Exactly. Awesome. Well, look, guys, thanks for joining me on the sofa. Always a pleasure to shoot the breeze and talk about stuff.
Enjoyed it very much.
We'll sure we'll get together again at some point in the future. And if anybody they won't be seeing this, I don't think, before tomorrow, but obviously we will be doing part 2 of our contact centre webinar tomorrow, which will be Thursday the 14th of March.
It will, yes. It will.
So I guess the key thing here is if people are watching this after that, it will be available to download and review. So hopefully we've given people a few good pointers this morning.
Thanks for the opportunity.
No problem.
Thanks, Andy.
See you again soon.
Cheers.
Indeed.